Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here back. Thanks again as well to Alex and Steffi and the whole DLD team for the invitation. It's an honor, and as Steffi said, when DLD Europe began, it felt like the idea was under threat a bit. Ironically now, talking about digital policy in Brussels is being in the center of the universe, because as we will hear later today, Europe is the place where the policy issues of the digital age, possibly the only place right now where they're being so discussed. You hear an American accent. I'm an American who's been in Berlin for 20 years, so please forgive the strong European patriotism you're going to hear from my keynote. And if it's because my keynote has a bit of economic glasses to it, I would like to really echo what we've heard this morning. If you believe in the European system, if you believe in European values, we believe that that means Europe has to have a strong digital economy, because that's the next economy. So to jump in, just a quick overview to help be a bit of an overture for how the day will go. I wanted to look a bit at where we stand in general with Europe's internet economy, talk about some key drivers that are moving the technology scene right now and can have an effect on what Brussels should be doing and setting as agenda, and then a few suggestions about the agenda. First, where we stand. As Steffi mentioned, the world does feel a little different this year in the tech space for a couple of big reasons, but of course in Brussels, the main one is the fact that we really are getting this feeling that there's an entire regulatory stack coming down the pipe towards the digital economy. As we've said, it began with GDPR, which to some degree the jury is still out. It's obviously not knocked Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon off their pedestal. It has obviously made life quite difficult for a lot of European companies trying to comply and figure out what all of the rules mean, and we think it'll take months and years to really know. For most consumers, it does have an effect, which is that we all got those great privacy notices. So it's palpable for people, but right now it feels more like something we're still trying to figure out how it's going to shake out. On top of that, we've got e-privacy that's been mentioned, which we feel is quite flawed, because it really is going to be going too far to make a data economy possible. It's right now potentially going to a trilogue process, so this is still a hot debate that's raging in Brussels right now. We have, thanks to Günther Oettinger, the digital minister, we have actually new telecommunications guidelines for how to roll out broadband across Europe, the EECC. It's another piece of the regulatory stack that's quite important. Copyright, as Florian Drucker and I were talking about today, it's actually pieces of it today are being decided. All of these things seemingly happening at once, uncoordinated, all over Brussels. The entire digital stack is getting regulated. Don't forget platforms of business, also on top of the stack, where we're trying to make some rules to keep neutrality baked into the system for the platform issue. So, deep breath. A lot to digest. Imagine running around trying to work on digital policy in Brussels. It can make your head spin these days. But in general, another big trend that we've of course seen is that it feels like the wind has changed a bit towards the tech industry. To some degree, we have Commissioner Vestager to thank with her really brave but actually wise decision to follow the law and enforce against Google after all of those years. But it really, we think, sent quite a signal, and it was, of course, heard in the U.S., and initially some voices in America said, oh, this is European protectionism, but actually, if you look closely, you'll find that all across the U.S., there are a lot of voices saying, look, we have market dominance, we have some monopoly behavior going on here. When the Boston Globe editorial board says, let's break up Google, that starts to have people taking notice. Of course, the wind has even changed out of the White House towards Google, but potentially for political reasons. But when the senior senator from Utah now says we should look at Google and potentially its market dominance, you can feel that in Washington the wind is shifting. Twitter and Facebook will be in the seat in the coming days, actually, to testify to Congress. So there definitely is a change in tone towards the tech giants, even in the U.S. And of course, we can't forget these images that perhaps personified the change in at least America's view towards some of these giant tech platforms. There's clearly a lot of questions legitimately being asked about what are these platforms doing to our democracies. Another big thing that really happened this year that we think is really oriented people's thinking. I call it Sputnik 2.0. We should actually call it Sputnik 20K. It was, of course, Bitcoin's incredible flare-up. It had a bit of a crash, but I'll get to it later. The Bitcoin run-up proved a few truths that really made people in the tech community awaken and see some potential in the underlying technology behind it. And so that's really driving a lot, and what I'll get to later related to the blockchain. So yes, the world does look quite different than it did at DLD Europe 17, and yet, frankly, in the tech space, the world is quite the same. It's 2018, software is still eating the world. The world's largest companies in terms of market value are software and technology companies. That's definitely not going to change anytime soon. Europe still dominates with the top 20 companies in football, so we still have something to be proud of economically. Unfortunately, the internet is still 0% EU in the top 20. Spotify's making a run at it, but I doubt I'll stand here in 2019 and have a whole lot of Europe to talk about on that table, which for me should be one of the goals of a conference like this today. How can we get someone on the board? In fact, this chart is 100 days old, meaning it's quite out of date. Those two companies are now over $1 trillion in valuation. So really, by the time you print these things, they're already out of date with the valuations right now. What's the same? Europe's venture capital gap is still the same. If you look Europe in red here on the left of each of the charts, we've always been looking up to the US. Something has changed, though. If you look now, we're now looking up at China, too. This is the great untold story, elephant in the room, as Steffi said. China has now caught the US in terms of the venture capital flowing into its technology system. Why is this money important? Because this is what feeds the entire ecosystem and helps these companies compete on the world stage. So we have a massive capital gap, and unfortunately, now everyone is calling us a 5G laggard because obviously Korea, China, and the US are making very aggressive plans. So the world still, in these regards, still feels a bit the same. What are some of the drivers moving the tech economy that can have an effect on Europe? Well, first, as mentioned, the next telecom internet really is coming. The groundwork is being laid. Since we're in Bavaria, I thought the Bavarian Repräsentanz, I thought I'd have some fun with our great German word you can all learn, Geschwindigkeitsexplosion, which is what 5G will bring. This is why it's important. Everyone who remembers each of the Gs when they came out realizes that they each brought new business models, new types of technology, new possibilities. And 5G is going to be the same. It's actually going to be 1 million times faster than those who experienced 1G when it came out. And when people say 5G, what do they actually mean? It's actually sort of as Steve Jobs would say with his phone. It's 3 in 1. You get, apologies for the German chart, but I just love all those phrases up there. First off, yes, you get faster broadband. Everyone can figure that out. But what you also get, as point number 2 there, is you get Internet of Things. You get machine-to-machine communication, low power, low energy use. It opens up a whole new range of possibilities. And the most exciting, number 3, is essentially no latency. You get 1 millisecond from throughout the entire system. So essentially no delay. That's going to have incredible ramifications for autonomous driving, even surgery, who knows. Incredible new products and services can be born on top of 5G. So it's quite important that we get it right. Underlying 5G, of course, is fiber, where Europe is not looking so great, except perhaps in the Nordics. For my German friends, get out your microscope. We're way down here at about 2.5% fiber penetration, essentially non-existent. There's a lot of work to do to get the fiber backbone that's going to have to underlie the entire 5G system. So there's a lot to do to get fiber rolled out across Europe. Luckily, the EECC, Commissioner Oettinger's proposal and the plans that have been passed really do call for something we called for in a study we did a couple of years ago. You need a competition-based system to get these investments done. It's a huge amount of investment that has to happen. If you're not China, where the state can just say, let's go, here's the hundreds of billions, you have to mobilize an incredible number of players in the market to make it happen. In Germany, for those of you who've been paying attention, actually the Germans would say, die Weichen werden gestellt. The tracks are right now being set for the direction. We're going to have a spectrum auction in early 2019, it looks like. Right now, the way things are shaping up, we might have a spectrum for 3 slots with 3 people offering. So not the best design. By the way, fiasco is spelled with a K in German, so just so you know if things don't go well. A huge driver, of course, and we'll talk about this a lot today, is artificial intelligence. But a key point that I think everyone in Brussels should know is artificial intelligence, machine learning, these programs, these algorithms, it's all well and good, but they run on data. So if you're regulating the entire data economy and not keeping in mind its effect on the artificial intelligence industry, if you will, then you're only getting it half right. You're regulating cars, but forgetting that they need gas. Why is this? This is a chart that everyone in the industry knows. It's quite old. It's from a study in 2001 from some Microsoft researchers that really changed the thinking and led to this explosion in the marriage of AI and data. What this study essentially showed was that if you were trying, until then people thought I have to write a better algorithm and that's the key to great AI. What these guys realized when they did this study, they were trying to do language processing. They were throwing millions of words at their algorithms, and what they realized was they could take old, rickety, terrible algorithms, but if they threw 1 billion words at it, if they threw more data at the same algorithm, the accuracy got way above 95, 98%. What does this mean? Better data makes your algorithm better. And it's the groundwork for the thinking, which is why everyone in Silicon Valley, of course, knows this. We need more data. Then we can throw AI at all of our pools of data. So let's talk about the AI industry. We're going to talk about it a lot today. This is a really important chart for everyone to have in mind. Asgard and Roland Berger did a study this year. Where is the AI right now? There's 100 companies doing AI in Germany. I posit there's actually today in German newspapers more articles about AI than there are AI companies in Germany, but it's another issue. Luckily, we're halfway between China and the US. We're not doing so bad, but another key problem is, of course, that all of the big companies have been playing in the space for quite some time and are acquiring the companies. So our hope is that a lot of these European companies will stick around, but I think the realities of the economy right now are that a lot of them will potentially end up in the hands of some of the big players. So again, this is just an article from this year. It gives you an idea of why a Google would be trying to capture so much data, because they can throw more AI at it and make better products for you. Just a quick example from my smartphone. I never told Google where I live. They just figured out where my phone slept every night with their machine learning, and suddenly I type my address in and it says zu Hause. I should trim my hedge, of course, so, but quite interesting, you know, we all take this for granted, don't we? Another driver is something that's coming to be called the next internet. This is a bit of a movement based around blockchain. It is from these two realizations from Bitcoin that you could potentially have decentral yet secure. We can debate that, but that was quite an insight of the Bitcoin system, that it hasn't been broken per se. And that if you incentivize a system where code is law, you can get people who don't even know each other to behave in interesting ways and sort of bake. You don't have to build trust into the system. You can just build with incentive, you can get people to behave in a certain way. Of course, what everyone is now working on, and this is sort of the gold rush statements you hear, are the missing protocols. What this means is that at the birth of the internet, we had a couple of protocols for file transfer, but because there was no protocol, if you will, at the basic level of the technology to transfer value, which is what Bitcoin is trying to do, or to transfer files, or to keep track of your identity, these are all the sort of, if you will, missing things that people are now rushing to try and put in at a lower level on the internet as a way to respond also to the monopolies out there. And of course the goal is a data economy, an economy where we can separate the apps from the data and create new products and services applying artificial intelligence to big pools of data. This is sort of the religious debate that's raging. Many people might know this chart. It's from Union Square Ventures, a VC in New York that invests a lot in blockchain. They posit that the web we had the protocol layer, and then all the great apps from Apple and Google and others captured all of the value, all of the money. They say the value in blockchain will actually be at the protocol layer, meaning the tokens or means of exchange within that protocol are going to be more valuable. It's a bit of a religious debate. A lot of people say this is poppycock, but this is sort of the debate that's raging, and it's to some degree why you see a lot of things happening in the protocol layer from all of these blockchain proposals. In fact, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the man who gave us the World Wide Web, is on board with these sort of ideas. He, together with MIT, has launched an organization called Solid, and what are they trying to do? They're trying to revolutionize data ownership and the exchange of data. So you can see this, the biggest minds in the internet are now grappling with this. We need a new system, we need a new paradigm. No one knows what it's going to be, but you can tell right now that a lot of great minds are working on it. Some of it's crazy, silly stuff, but you can see a lot of really, really interesting things. Here's one of my favorites from Berlin, the Ocean Protocol. A really amazing Canadian programmer and his team are trying to put together a blockchain-based marketplace because their realization is most of the data in the world is locked behind secure servers. Nobody's going to share that. But what if we could find a way so that I could unlock my data, put it into the marketplace, let others use it, I get money from that, others get value out of it, it's a win-win for everyone. So there's a lot of really interesting models being born. And another thing you'll hear in the next panel that's really moving a lot these days is platform alliances. It began with Mr. Dupfner and Callan. We'll talk at the end of the day. You saw, for instance, the publishers, the publishing industry were first movers a few years ago saying, good Lord, we have to do something against these ad tech platforms and form alliances. But this has moved way beyond just news publishing and media. Now on the next panel, you'll hear Jan Utzschen talk about a really interesting alliance that's forming around identity across different platforms and across different companies. The auto industry is doing an incredible amount of alliances now. Why is that? The estimate is that a car will be consuming 1 gigabyte of data per minute. That's a lot of data. So no one company can handle this all. So you see that a Bosch, a Conti, NVIDIA, and Volkswagen, you're getting really interesting alliances and bedfellows built around the fact that all of these new things are built around a data economy. And finally, it does need to be mentioned. There's a great phrase running around, everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized. It's a bit of a gold rush fever, but we can't ignore the fact that this was the year of the initial coin offering liftoff, in which potentially as an alternative to venture capital, an incredible number of teams are out there raising money directly from investors by issuing coins or tokens to their future protocol marketplace. It's a bit gaga, but I just want to point out that the amount of ICO funding in 2018 has already surpassed Europe's VC from last year. So it's getting too big to ignore economically. In fact, it's so big to ignore. One of my favorite web pages for a great ICO was actually from the Securities and Exchange Commission. They were tired of seeing so many scams out there that they created their own joke website for the Howie coin. And these are actually SEC employees. So the joke is actually on you if you tried to buy Howie coins. If you ask, this is a great study from Slush and Atomico they do every year. They did a survey asking the tech scene what should be regulated. Pardon my Sharpie there with the purple color, but where do we need the regulation to help us move quickly into new areas? Interestingly enough, about half said crypto or blockchain. The other half said AI. Some said a combination of both. I found this statement really interesting, though, from someone from the token economy. The ideal scenario would be for a European authority to enable fully tokenized equity structures, which would be a game changer. Essentially, let us have security tokens. Instead of just selling tokens for these protocol exchanges, let me sell you a token to, say, represent the value of investments in Berlin real estate, or who knows, let's tokenize the whole economy is the wish here. Guess what? Game changed. Just last week, the Swiss stock authorities have announced they are going to make the way clear for security tokens, which is sort of the holy grail right now for everyone in the blockchain finance world. So get ready. The next 12 months are going to see, I think, an incredible frenzy of activity in this space. So you heard it here first. If you hadn't heard it already, get ready for security tokens coming from the Swiss market. In fact, a lot of people in Brussels that are in charge politically have realized that we need a new paradigm, we need some kind of a new strategy here. This is a wonderful quote, if you have the time to read it, from Guy Verhofstadt. I think just even the top, just to say we need to look at things differently, we need to try and find a new way forward for Europe based on our values. He, of course, is betting everything on blockchain and saying let's invest in AI and quantum. We can debate how to do it, but it's interesting to see that even people in Brussels are realizing the way forward has to be something new. So what should the agenda be? As I mentioned, more capital. No need to spend a lot of time on that. It's not in the early stage, it's in the late stage. The European scale-ups are just outspent. That's just the way of the world right now. There's just much more capital from the Chinese or the American startups, and that's the structural disadvantage that all the great European startups face. When I say more capital, I don't mean, dear Brussels, let's open the pump some more, although it would be nice. A key structural problem in Europe is the lack of private capital. This chart from the State of EU Tech Report shows it really nicely. These two are the opposite of each other. These are the sources of the capital, pension funds versus government agencies. You'll see the European one gets a ton of the money from government agencies. The European Investment Bank is doing an incredible amount. Where are the pension funds in Europe? These are the structural problems. We really need to unlock more private capital and get it flowing into the system. Another elephant in the room, of course, is that when the UK drops off, if they drop off, then those numbers for European capital also are going to drop. Encourage alliances, we mentioned it already, it's on the next panel. This is just really key, and not just among big players, but also that smaller players have a chance to compete and survive and thrive in the global market. And again, if we're regulating here in Brussels and doing this stack, let's remember that competition is the goal. It's great to talk about data protection, and the right to your data is a European fundamental right. Nobody is denying that, but please let's keep our eye on the ball. We want to keep European tech companies competitive and help them compete on the world stage. And another plea from many of the people in the tech scene that I know, especially the blockchainers, use the tech, walk the talk. It's great to say we really need this and it's going to be wonderful, but implement it. Put in some programs that actually make use of this tech. And finally, the bonus round, what's our plan? This is also a big question floating here today at DLD Brussels, hopefully, DLD Europe. Hopefully hear some great answers the rest of the day from this stage. It can't be Europe 2020. That was just the digital single market. Does anybody even know what Europe 2020's goals were? Time's running out. We need a new plan for Europe. Here's where the regulation is lagging from Europe. Essentially pick any future area. We don't really have a lot of clarity. And when I say regulation, a lot of these industries need the clarity of rules and guidelines and regulations so that investment can happen. So the tech industry is not necessarily against regulation, they just need clarity and speed from the regulators. And here finally a bit of optimism from my side. Europe's chance, here's a survey where Slash and Atomico asked the tech space, okay, who's poised to win? And these are of course some of the most promising areas, and we'll talk about many of them today: cyber, AI, virtual reality, etc. Unfortunately, those countries aren't in the EU, and if Brexit happens, they're off the table too. So Germany, France, Estonia, and Sweden, you should talk. Yeah? Luckily, the next panel has Swedes and Germans and Estonians, so we're actually going to move right to get to work on that area. So the race is on, and yeah, unfortunately, some would see it that we're already starting a little behind. Some could say it's not a bug, it's a feature, but there is a race running, and we feel like at the Internet Economy Foundation, the answer to this can't just be that. That's great. It's great to get clarity, find that Brussels is regulating, somebody has to do it, all of these things needed an update. But I think we need a plan. As Steffi said, we need a moonshot. Where are we going with this? What do we really want to achieve? Hopefully we'll hear some answers today on the stage at DLD Europe. Thank you, guys.